For decades, we thought we knew how global trade worked, but something fundamental has shifted. The old rules, they don't seem to apply anymore. We've entered a new era of strategic competition, tariffs, and a total rethinking of how the world does business. So today, we're going to unpack this new trade reality.
Okay, let's just start with a number to give you a sense of the scale here. $2.7 trillion. That's how much global trade has been hit by new tariff measures, according to the World Trade Organization. And get this, that's the highest level they've ever recorded since they started tracking this back in 2009. So yeah, this isn't just some minor tweak, it's a seismic event.
So, how do we get our heads around all this? Well, we've broken it down into 5 key parts. We'll kick things off with the policies that started this new era, then we'll measure the economic shockwaves. After that, we'll trace the impact on your wallet, revisit that core tech conflict that's still raging, and finally, look at how businesses are being forced to change their entire game plan.
All right, first up, we have to understand the specific policy that's at the heart of this whole disruption. Recent U.S. actions, particularly something called Section 301 tariffs, didn't just bend the rules. They pretty much tore up the old playbook for the global trading system.
So what exactly is Section 301? Well, think of it as a tool in the U.S. trade law toolbox. It basically gives the government the authority to push back hard against foreign countries it believes are playing unfairly or breaking trade agreements. And in this case, the investigation was laser-focused on one country's actions.
And this slide, right here, gets to the heart of the why. The official reason for these tariffs wasn't about things like steel or soybeans. It was all about technology. The U.S. pointed to a whole pattern of practices by China, things like forcing American companies to hand over their tech, using state money to buy up sensitive firms, and, of course, cyber theft and intellectual property theft on a massive scale. This really set the stage for a new kind of conflict.
Now, when you impose tariffs on this kind of scale, you just know there are going to be consequences. So let's move on and actually look at the measurable impact this had on the global economy.
This chart really paints the picture of the headwinds. Economic models estimate these tariffs literally shaved about 0.13% off global GDP. And here's the kicker. In the U.S., the manufacturing sector actually saw a net loss of jobs. Why? Because any benefits from protection were completely wiped out by higher costs for imported parts and other countries hitting back with their own tariffs. And, no surprise, global trade volumes just shrank.
Let's zoom in a little closer, because this data shows a really interesting split. If you look at the column for imports from China, you see these huge negative numbers. So the tariffs absolutely worked at reducing those imports. But then look all the way to the right at the value of U.S. production. It's positive. Key sectors like semiconductors and motor vehicles actually saw a boost. It's a really complex picture of winners and losers.
And listen, this isn't just abstract data. This quote from an executive at Honda makes it real. Even though Honda gets most of its steel right here in America, the tariffs on imported steel allowed U.S. producers to jack up their own prices. Boom! Suddenly Honda is on the hook for hundreds of millions in new costs. It's a textbook case of the ripple effect.
And those ripple effects, they hit consumers directly. One study found that for the households most exposed to these import tariffs, their quarterly spending actually fell by 1.2%. Now, that might not sound like a huge number, but it shows that the costs weren't just being felt in boardrooms, they were being felt at kitchen tables.
And that drop in spending power leads us straight to our next big topic, the inflationary shockwave. Because, when you tax imports at the port, that cost has to go somewhere.
It's the classic question, right? It's at the very heart of this entire debate. When a government slaps a tariff on something, who actually ends up footing the bill?
Okay, let's just walk through the chain reaction here. Step 1, the tariff is a tax paid on imported stuff. Step 2, that means businesses that import those things suddenly have higher costs. Step 3, to protect their profits, they pass those costs on to their customers. And Step 4, you, the consumer, end up paying a higher price at the register. Simple as that.
Now this is where psychology comes in, and it's fascinating. Research from the Federal Reserve found that what businesses think is going to happen is crucial. If they believe the tariffs are just a temporary bargaining chip, maybe they'll eat some of the cost. But if they think this is the new normal, they pass on way more of that cost, up to 3 times more, directly to consumers.
And the Federal Reserve actually put a number on it. Their analysis concluded that these tariffs have already directly caused a 0.3% increase in core consumer goods prices.
That's a clear, measurable inflationary hit tied directly to this trade policy.
So all of this economic pain, it brings us back to the original reason for doing it. If the whole point was to stop China's aggressive push for technology, well, did it work? That's what we're tackling next.
4 years after these tariffs were put in place, the agency in charge, the U.S. Trade Representative, or USTR, did a big review, and their main finding was, well, pretty blunt. They found that China's aggressive policies for getting technology and intellectual property, they're still going strong.
And the USTR report lays it all out. The methods haven't really stopped. We're still seeing huge global cyber campaigns, like one they called Operation Cuckoo Bees, which stole just trillions in intellectual property. Economic spying is still targeting super-sensitive tech like autonomous vehicles, and state-backed money is still being used to buy up key firms, often through these tangled networks of front companies. The bottom line, the tariffs did not solve the problem.
Okay, so the core conflict is still simmering. The economic landscape has been shaken up. What do you do if you're a business caught in the middle? You're forced to adapt. And that brings us to our final section, which is honestly one of the biggest economic stories of our time.
This slide just captures the new reality perfectly. For decades, the entire playbook was efficiency first. That meant find the cheapest place to make something, which was often China, and build your whole supply chain around that. The new playbook? It's resilience first. It's all about spreading your bets, managing risk, and making sure you're not dependent on any one country. Cost still matters, of course, but it's no longer the only thing that matters.
So where's everybody going? Well, this big reshuffling is creating new winners. We're seeing U.S. companies dramatically increase their sourcing from places like Vietnam and other Southeast Asian countries, and also from partners closer to home, like Mexico and Canada. The map of global trade is literally being redrawn before our eyes.
And I really want to stress this point. This isn't a temporary blip. It's not a short-term fix. This is a deep structural change. Businesses now see geopolitical risk as a permanent part of the business environment, and they are rewiring their entire operations to be less vulnerable. It's a huge shift.
So to pull it all together, this new era of high tariffs has definitely inflicted real economic costs and fueled some inflation. It hasn't solved the underlying tech conflict with China. But what it has done is force a historic and probably permanent shift in global business strategy, a pivot away from pure efficiency and towards survival and resilience.
And that leaves us with the final, multi-trillion-dollar question for the future of the global economy. For decades, efficiency was king. Now, resilience is the priority. Finding the right balance between those two, that's going to define the next chapter of global business. What does that new equilibrium even look like? That's the strategic puzzle everyone is trying to solve right now.